Thank you and welcome to Disney Sunday Assembly. I would ask if any of the people in the back want to sort of hang out in the first few rows. We have plenty of seats up front, so you'll be able to sing along and be part of the congregation. So this next song, you can see in your program, I'm sorry, we're doing some pretty obscure Disney music. It's the next song you probably haven't heard around the radio and on the Oscars and everywhere you walk. But I know that there are some kids up here that love it so much they would really love to be on stage and help us with this song. So if there's any kids here that want to sing Let It Go with us, please come up stage right here on the steps where there's not many chords. Be careful if you don't want to trip. Sarah has lyrics for you right here if you want to sing with us. Come up and join. Now's the time. Alright, we'll just have to perform as best we can. If any kids change their mind and want to come up in the middle, that's perfectly fine. I see some wheels turning. Well, you can sing from your seats too if you want.
Isolation, and it looks like I'm the My name is Lane Aarons. It's a wonderful song. My name is Lane Aarons. I'm going to be your minister at AMC for the day. I'm super excited to be a part of this. I've missed a couple of these, but I'm so excited to be part of this new sort of experimental community we're trying to form here. Raise your hand if you've been to Sunday Assembly before. Raise your hand if this is your first Sunday Assembly. Awesome. We have quite a few mixed. It would be great if everyone got a little closer, sit next to some neighbors. I don't want anyone to feel lonely. The whole point of this is we're going to have some new friends and a new community, and you can't make friends if we're all spread out everywhere. Turn to the person next to you, whether it's someone you came here with or someone you've never met before, and just say, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you guys, I'm so glad you're all here. A couple notes before we really get started. This month we're only photographing those of us crazy enough to get up here on the stage, so don't worry, your picture isn't going to end up on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that unless you're the one who puts it there. For the little ones, if you want to stay in here, that's great. The K through 5 kids, we have Marie, who's our teacher, will be in the back. There's Marie waving, hi. She's going to be out here in the hall doing some activities with the children. Feel free to join her. Although anytime they're singing, you can come on in and you're still invited to come sing up here on stage with us. And for the itty bitty ones, there's also some early childhood activities out in the hall as well. So if you've got some preschoolers or toddlers who need to get up and run around, feel free to do that too. And of course, there'll be snacks afterwards, which is the most important thing, right? We're all here for the coffee and donuts. So today's theme is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done to yourself, or alternatively, the negative version, do not do to others what you would not have done to yourself. This is a really kind of controversial topic. It sounds religious, doesn't it? But it doesn't have to. It's one of the only moral codes that exists in some variety in almost every religion or culture around the world. But is it really universal? Is it something that applies to all beings and to all situations? That's something that we can debate. There have been a few questions raised on the Facebook page, and it would be great if you have comments to keep that conversation going there, or after today, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Today we're going to hear from a couple speakers who are going to talk about their interpretation of the Golden Rule and how they've applied it to something they're passionate about in their lives, which is vegan activism. So I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers today. The featured presenters are vegan activists Joseph Espinoza and Leslie Patterson. Joe grew up in the south suburb of Chicago. In college, he saw video footage of neighbors live in chicken production sheds, and 3 weeks later stopped eating meat and got involved in animal protection work. He's one of the top leafletters in Vegan Outreach's Adopt a College program, having handed a detailed booklet on how modern farming treats animals to over 450,000 students. Leslie is an art librarian, also an animal rights activist, who found her dream job at the Chicago Public Library. While in library school at the University of Pittsburgh, she joined the animal rights movement and never looked back. She has handed out over 130,000 leaflets at college campuses across the Midwest as part of Vegan Outreach's Adopt a College program. They both live here in Chicago in the Hecklish neighborhood with their 3 vegan dogs, hamsters, a lizard, and I'm so happy they're here to talk to us a little bit about veganism.
Hello, everyone. So I was a little nervous about talking today, so I did what every, professional, independent woman would do. I asked my boyfriend to come. Well, he's an activist, so I figured he should come too. And that song, my niece loves it, and now I can see why. It's amazing. So it says on the agenda that we're vegan activists, and it's true that we're vegans and we're activists, but really we consider what we do to be in the service of animals, not in the service of any particular diet or lifestyle. As animal protection activists, we work to reduce the amount of suffering of animals in the world. And because 99 out of 100 animals that suffer and die do so in the food industry, we choose to work on farmed animal issues. Veganism is a tool that allows us to reduce the amount of suffering that we cause in the world. Now, I know whenever anyone says that they're an activist, I always want to know, what do they do? Well, as Lane mentioned in the introduction, we focus on raising awareness of how animals live and die and asking people to try making vegetarian food choices. In some ways, animals have always been a part of my search for meaning in life. I grew up in a household full of pets, and really it was my dream to one day just have a dog of my own. So as soon as I finished college, I went out and I got a little Jack Russell Terrier puppy who I named Sir Lancelot, or Lance. Lance became my best friend, and we were inseparable. And it was kind of a hard time in my life. After college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was sort of bouncing around. I think we lived in, a dozen different apartments in New Orleans, and 3 different cities, didn't have the greatest relationships. But I felt like if I could give this one little dog a good life, then I would have accomplished something. And I also felt like because his whole life depended on me, that I owed that to him. Well, I grew up in a household, like most of us probably, where we ate meat every day. But as I started getting closer and closer to Lance, I started questioning that and feeling a little odd about the animals that we were eating. So in the year 2000, my Uncle John had terminal cancer, and he invited us to spend a week with him in Mexico on his boat, just so we could spend time together. And each night we would fish for our dinner. And I started to feel strangely about the beautiful silver ocean fish that we were pulling out of the ocean. And one night I just realized, hey, we have other things, I don't have to eat the fish. And I realized that I could become a vegetarian. Can you hear me? Okay, it's like moving down. Yeah. I felt it bump me. So I knew what a vegetarian was because I had an aunt who was one. So that was an easy decision. And then a couple years later, I finally figured out what I wanted to do with my life. And I moved to Pittsburgh to attend library school. And at that moment, finally away from the city where I grew up, away from my family, I was able to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And then I realized that I wanted to help others. And as a librarian in a public library, I knew I could help people, but I still wanted to help animals. So I joined my first animal rights group. In that group, I learned about, what happens to cows and calves and chickens in the dairy and egg industry, and then I also decided to go vegan. Well, this, learning reality can be really overwhelming, and I know that. But the hopeful thing is that it doesn't have to be this way, and we can change things. Because the fact of the matter is, the only reason that we do what we do to animals, which I won't go into detail, is because we can, because we're stronger than them. But the fact is that we have a choice. There are a lot of justifications that people have used over the ages to oppress and exploit animals, and really a lot of them are the same as what have been used to oppress and exploit humans, other humans. They might say they're different, they're not as smart, they don't have souls. But the fact is that chickens, fishes, turkeys, pigs, and cows, they all have the same ability to feel pain that we do. As the great vegetarian physician Albert Schweitzer said, when we have a choice, we must avoid bringing torment and injury into the life of another. To do so is to renounce our manhood and shoulder a guilt which nothing justifies. And some people might say, oh, well, we could just treat them better or, raise them on smaller farms. but the fact of the matter is, would we want to be in their position? And I think that's where the golden rule comes in. Basically, the golden rule is the idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes and imagining how you would feel if you were in them. I think that if any of us were an animal suffering on a farm, we would want someone to get us out. And as I mentioned, just by changing our food choices, we can get them out. Because the less consumption there is, the less demand, and the less animals that will be trapped in those systems. You might say it's subjective, but really, I think a wise man once pointed out that suffering is the worst thing in the world. And everything that we do in our lives is to avoid suffering on some level. And all the bad things that we consider bad are bad because they cause suffering. Things like violence, pollution, slavery, poverty, natural disasters. Well, this sounds pretty dark, but the amazing thing is that we have tremendous opportunity and hope just through our everyday choices. Every time we say no to meat, an animal is saved from systematic violence, and each of us has that power. So in February of 2012, Lance got sick. He was 15 years old, and within a week he was gone. I was devastated. I didn't know how I could go on losing my best friend. And I still miss him every day, but I'm so grateful for the gift that our relationship gave me. And it's an awareness that resonates strongly with the golden rule and provides the impetus, really, for my life's purpose. That all sentient creatures deserve what we want for ourselves and for our loved ones. Protection from unnecessary suffering and the opportunity to have the best life possible.
Thank you for having me. Sarah, your voice is outstanding, which didn't help my confidence. I rarely speak, and that we have a lot of work to do at karaoke tonight. Okay, even further back than the typical person, I'm really the most unlikely advocate on many levels. I really did not think that I would be here speaking on behalf of animals today. As a child growing up in a household in the South Suburbs, we were a household of pretty humble means. Our vacations each year were a visit to my uncle's dairy farm in Medford, Wisconsin. Did that from the time I was 6 till about 14. But by the time I was 12, I knew enough about the operation that I could actually run the farm myself. They didn't let me, but I knew each and every aspect. It was just a 60-cow operation. In 1989, I entered college at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I was actually in the College of Agriculture, aspiring to be a dairy farmer like my uncle. That's what I learned as a child. Within the first few weeks of learning about and seeing the way that modern farming treats animals, it was clear that modern farming had changed in an intensely brutal direction, even in just a few years from the late 70s and early 80s where I learned farming. Despite that background in farming, what was happening at that time, when I saw it just in the first few weeks as an ag student, even I wasn't comfortable with. I ended up withdrawing from the College of Agriculture and took a degree in biology instead. Back in Wisconsin, my uncle learned the same lesson about the changes in the animal agricultural field the hard way. During my years in high school, he operated the farm at a loss for 3 years. You can't do that indefinitely. So went bankrupt in the 4th year, and he had the option of staying on to work for a larger corporate farm. He wasn't comfortable with the techniques they would have required him to use on the animals, so he walked away. Was in bankruptcy and just took a job in a factory. And he's still up there, working, living. His smaller 60-cow operation simply would not be able to bring milk to market with the same low cost and high profitability ratio as larger producers who are willing to use the more suffering-intensive techniques, that's the key to what put him out of the industry. And it's not that large producers are particularly sadistic. In some ways, it's just kind of an ethical race to the bottom. If you don't use these techniques that cause increased suffering compared to traditional farming, like my uncle, you will be unable to compete and you'll go out of business. So there's a lot of power really in us as consumers on what we think is acceptable or not in our food choices. In my last year of college, I saw video footage of the way modern farming treats chickens, which I had never seen. After learning a bit more about it over the next 21 days, I was thinking, very uncomfortable 21 days, but at the end of it all, I had to admit, wait, something really wrong is happening here. I stopped eating meat and got involved in animal protection work. So, despite having a childhood invested in animal agriculture, this is what I was taught as a child, this is what my family was involved with, and I myself started college aiming for a career in it. Over the course of a few years, with learning some new and accurate information, I moved from a meat-eating ag kid to a vegetarian animal protectionist. Looking back now, the change away from harming and into helping animals was really a progressive process, and probably began, when I think back on it, was at age 10, my favorite cow, Buttercup, was a Swedish cow. We returned for our winter vacation to Medford, and she was not on the milking line. So of course they told me she had gotten ill, and they had to put her down. Years later, learning more about the dairy industry, the fact of the matter is she was pulled off of the milking line at age 6 because her production declines. Cows produce milk only after being impregnated and giving birth, and they're re-impregnated every year, but after about 5 or 6 cycles, they're just not able to produce as well as, say, a younger cow, so they're sent off. Working in the field of social work as I do today, I understand that most behavior change is progressive like this, not real rapid. And just to be clear, we're not here today, everyone's always afraid of us, we're not here today to tell you how to live. If I had that power, the world would be a lot better place real quick. I don't have that power, nor would I want it. We are here today to convey a little bit of information about how animals used in modern farming are forced to live, suffer, and die. Chickens, turkeys, pigs, cows, and fishes have the same capacity to feel pain as our more familiar household guest dogs and cats, and us. That ability to feel pain is what qualifies them for moral consideration beyond, say, how we would treat rocks, plants, or last Sunday when somebody treated our car windshield. Causing others to suffer and die for our own pleasure is a very ugly and selfish thing to do. That's just the truth of it. With this in front of us, as decent people, we're challenged. What do we do? Again, keeping in mind that most behavior change in either direction is progressive, I'd like to point out, the harm reductionist that I am, anything done to reduce the suffering that we cause others is a good thing. Reducing consumption of animal products spares animals. Avoiding the animal products that cause the most suffering and death per pound or per calorie is the most potent harm reduction technique. And those animal products that are the most suffering intensive would be bird flesh, chicken and turkey flesh, eggs, and the flesh of aquatic animals. And the reason for that is those animals, their size. You or I could eat a chicken in a day if we get our heads. We could feed off of our cow's body for a few years because of the size difference. So how that plays out is, even if a current meat eater didn't reduce their consumption of meat at all, but just made it a point to try to avoid eating smaller animals, bird flesh and fish flesh and eggs, they would drastically reduce the amount of suffering and the number of animals subjected to suffering and death for them. Further up the spectrum, many people do go the way that we went. We don't want to support that to the best of my ability, becoming vegetarian or vegan. Just to underline the harm reduction of size difference, it takes about 200 chickens to make up the same amount of flesh as just one cow. Also worth noting, the existence of chickens in modern farming is probably the most suffering intense of any farmed animal. Not to get too gory, but a big factor in the amount of suffering they go through is just their own body. They've been selectively bred to grow so very quickly today versus, say, 40 years ago. What we're seeing today is that, the little fuzzy yellow chick that weighs just a few ounces, you can hold her in your hand. She'll move from that size up to a 5-pound market weight bird in 6 to 7 weeks. What that rapid rate of growth means is that some of them aren't going to make it, they're going to fall because of heart or other organ failure. A significant number of them are going to have joint problems because their bones are not growing as quick as that massive and excessive muscle growth. The other big source of suffering for chickens is that they're in a shed, and the bedding that they're on is pretty quickly soaked by ammonia from their own waste. Then they're in contact with that constantly, which causes significant burns to skin, eyes, and respiratory tracts. When it's time to gather them, to transport them off for slaughter, they're frightened, and they're running and flapping. The workers are grabbing them any which way they can, so a significant number will experience broken bones and ripped tendons in the gathering and caging for transport. Then they get to travel with those injuries for some length of time, and finally, when at their destination, pulled out and shackled with those same injuries. I don't know if anybody's ever had an experience, most people probably had a significant injury. When I was in 8th grade, I broke my hand, and we didn't realize it was broken until 4 weeks later. So I walked around with a broken hand for 4 weeks. Only in certain positions would the bones separate, and it's like electric, well, something's really wrong. So we finally took me in and found out, yeah, it was broken. It's a very painful experience, and I can imagine that's what birds with broken bones or tendons or being jostled around in a transport truck or then handled for shackling experience. And the last nasty little thing that happens to chickens is that for ease of handling in the slaughter process, they are electrocuted with a power that's enough to paralyze them, but not enough to render them insensible to pain. So while they can't move, they're still experiencing pain of the cut and the previous traumas they had. So, bottom line, the jury is in, size matters. If you avoid eating smaller animals, that's very impactful in sparing animals. That's all we really have to say. We're open to questions and answers now or later. Thank you.
Think tomatoes today. And the reason is I'm hoping that each family will bring one home with them because I think that there's something really revolutionary in a homegrown tomato. And one of the things I always loved about Sunday Assembly is the celebration of things that we are excited about as non-religious people. It's about the living better, the helping often, the wondering more, not just what we don't like about the religious community that dominates American society. So what's revolutionary about a homegrown tomato? Well, first of all, if you've ever had one, the flavor will knock your socks off. You cannot buy a homegrown tomato or a decent tomato for any amount of money. And why is that? Well, when you grow out these tomatoes and you have one on your windowsill, you're going to pick it just at the peak of flavor, something they can't do at your jewel store. And that means that all the sugars and all the flavors will have been developed perfectly just for the time that you're picking it. You can pick varieties that are the perfect variety for the taste that you're going to have or the way you're going to grow them. Your diet will be so much better if you could make just a tiny portion of it. Secondly, you control what goes into your food. If you want to grow your food organically without any pesticides or herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, you can do that. You can take care of your plant just the way you want it taken care of, because eventually that's going to become part of you. And there's something really beautiful about that. And third, the really slightly dorky part of it, but the part that excites me the most the more I learn about gardening, is the wonder of the science that's going on in the garden, and the way that the roots of a plant interact with the bacteria, the fungi, the nematodes, and so many other things that are in the soil is fascinating. The way that the plant you grow is part of the carbon cycle, the oxygen cycle, the water cycle, and the nitrogen cycle is just dork heaven for me. I just love learning how this thing interacts with its environment. And if you have children, there is no way to excite them more about science, to me, than teaching them lessons about how a plant interacts in the world. And I don't think they'll ever forget that science lesson. And I know they will never forget those homegrown tomatoes. So I hope I've inspired you to grow a few of your own. Thank you.
That's pretty cool. Thanks. So you get free stuff, remember too. It's not just coffee and donuts, it's tomatoes. One of my favorite parts of Sunday Assembly is finding out what brought people here. We all come from such different backgrounds, some of them traumatic, some not so much. And I'm always curious what brought people together today. So I'd like to invite Benjamin Schaefer to come up and talk about why he's here at Sunday Assembly.
In this auditorium today are a lot of people with a whole range of reasons for being here, many different backgrounds and a variety of perspectives. Our beliefs are not identical, our family structures vary, and our values may turn out to be the most different of all. Most of all, we have different needs and desires when we come to Sunday Assembly. The great value in creating a community like Sunday Assembly comes from this diversity. Instead of creating a community that strives to make us all the same, we have the extraordinary opportunity to surround ourselves with people who are different from us and find a way to be comfortable with that. Because there is no authority here to tell us what to think, nor any holy book to declare the will of a higher power, we have a chance to be our diverse selves without fear of shame. The strength of the community we can build at Sunday Assembly need not be built on conformity to a standard given to us from above. Instead, it can come from the sharing of different perspectives, inquiry into diverse values, and exploration of the contrasting ideas. We've been examining the Golden Rule, an ethical concept with deep roots and resonance, but perhaps also with some fundamental problems and flawed assumptions. One of those flawed assumptions comes from the diversity that we're able to celebrate here. The way that I want to be treated and the way that you do may be totally different because we're different people with different needs and desires. What can come of building a community in which ethical ideas can be explored through embracing our differences instead of attempting to extract them? We have no holy book here at Sunday Assembly, but we can learn from those books considered holy by others. Together we can explore all sources of human knowledge for wisdom about ethics and values. We can do that as individuals, of course, but a community like Sunday Assembly allows us to learn from each other as well. This opportunity is what is so important to me about Sunday Assembly. I genuinely want to hear perspectives that differ from mine so that I can better understand the values and needs of those around me. Sunday Assembly has the potential to be a place where I can learn more about my own values and your values too. We can all find ways to live better, help often, and wonder more by sharing our different viewpoints as a community, and most importantly, by listening to the viewpoints of those who are different from ourselves. Thank you.
So now we're going to ask you to do one more thing that hopefully isn't too hard. We ask for a service from all of you, which is to give what you can to help defray the cost of producing Sunday Assembly. Baskets are going to come around. Trust me, none of the people on the planning committee are interested in money. It's definitely a work of passion on their part. The committee spent $150 to rent this wonderful school, which in turn supports CPS and its students. The sound man takes a liberal fee of $50, which is very kind. And we're starting the expensive process of finding a new event location. So as you wait for the donation basket to come around, please feel free to chat with your neighbor. We have these small groups called Smoops. Currently there is a knitting Smoop, a queer Smoop, a parent Smoop. If you have any ideas for another Smoop, maybe share that with people next to you. See what kind of feedback you get, and we'd love to hear more about it later. So, go ahead. Be generous if you can. Sunday Assembly, who also happens to be a Chicago Public Librarian. This is sort of becoming an unofficial Chicago Public Library side project. There's a lot of us involved here, myself included. So I'll go ahead and give out a few more notices before we wrap up today. There is a new website, which maybe you've seen already, chicago.sundayassembly.com. And of course, there's still web presence on Facebook and Twitter. The web presence for Sunday Assembly seems to be ever evolving, but hopefully this one's going to stick around for a while as we learn what works and what doesn't. Coming up on Saturday, June 14th, we're participating in Kids Day at Chicago Food Depository. There's space for Sunday Assembly to have 20 people, 8 of those should be kids at least 5 years old. So if you have families that want to participate, please email chicagosundayassembly@gmail.com for more details. Like I mentioned, Smoops, if you have ideas, please feel free to share those at chicagosundayassembly@gmail.com as well. We don't have new dates yet for the mini parenting and queer Smoops that met last month. We do have some new dates. Okay. Yep, talk to Benjamin. We've got info on that coming shortly. Today, if you want to keep chatting about some of the things you had to think about today, this conversation is going to continue, whether it's online or also in a slightly more formal way at the Aggie Pub today at 3420 West Grace. A group of people will be meeting there. Hopefully that's going to continue. Go have some lunch and chat about what you learned today. There's always a need for volunteers, whether it's for the planning committee or if you want to do what I did today and sweat in front of everybody to be the MC, or if you'd like to participate in the band. Please let us know if you want to be involved, see any of the planning committee members, or email saying chicagosundayassembly@gmail.com if you have any interest in volunteer activities. Also, if you have ideas for future community service projects, they're always looking for good suggestions there as well. The next Sunday Assembly service is going to be Sunday, May 18th, here at Murphy. And we'll be featuring University of Chicago Divinity student Warren Watson, who will be speaking on the theme of living better. So speaking of living better, I attempted to be a vegetarian. I guess I was successful for about 5 years in the year 2000. Part of it was living better health-wise. I knew that vegetarian diet was good for me. High cholesterol and heart problems were in the family, so maybe eating a few less cheeseburgers would be a good idea. Also, I was dating a vegetarian, so it just seemed easier to go along with what you wanted to eat, even though I was still craving cheeseburgers and fried chicken on a regular basis. My downfall came because we lived very close to a KFC, and every day I would drive past this KFC and the aroma of that really gross fried chicken would come wafting out, and I just put it off for 5 years, and then one day that bad breakup came, and instead of diving into Ben & Jerry's, I went to the drive-thru. Fast forward to me sobbing over a 3-piece original recipe Kentucky Fried Chicken in a Jewel parking lot, like just crying. It was probably a low point of my life. And the saddest thing is that fried chicken didn't even taste as good as I thought it was going to. 5 years of smelling that KFC, it sounded like such a good idea at the time. I really regretted that decision. Lo and behold, I did go back to eating meat. But I learned so much during that time as a vegetarian. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the way animals are treated. I learned to cook better. I learned a little bit more about taking care of myself. And I think it gave me a real consciousness of how my food choices affect the world around me. So maybe today I still eat meat, but I'm more thoughtful about how and when I eat, also the kind of purchases I make, even things like what kind of soap I'm using. All of that I learned from animal activists and from that boyfriend who broke my heart and taught me so much about vegetarianism. So I'll always be grateful for that. To me, the golden rule is all about empathy. It's recognizing your neighbor as a self. Does that apply to animals? That's really up to you to decide. Some people don't think it does. That's a philosophical question we can all ask ourselves. Now, to quote a quote from Wikipedia that matches of scholarly knowledge, the golden rule is of no use to you whatsoever unless you realize that it's your move. I really like thinking of it as a call to action. Those actions could be big, they could be small. No matter your interpretation, no harm can come let's all leave here today thinking about how we can help more and maybe harm a little less. On that note, let's sing along, have some fun. If you have kids outside, we'd love to invite them back in so they can join the singing. Our wonderful band is going to come out and have a couple more fun Disney tunes to wrap up the day. And I want to thank you all for having me here and for listening to me ramble for a few minutes. And I can't wait to see everybody next month. Oh, look at Disney ears. Minnie has joined us.
So I have a few quick announcements. So big picture, Sunday Assembly started beginning of the year, started meeting here once a month, and we're going to be going through a turnover after May. On May, we're going to have elections for a new board of directors. Could I have anybody stand who's on the board of directors? Me included, and we have board, Mike, Nikki. Stand. Wave to everybody, come on, please. Talk to these people at Abbey. If you want to come out to Abbey Pub and you want to know what it's like to be on the board of directors, if you want to run for the board of directors, we're going to be, I'd like you to write a little blurb to introduce yourself, no more than about 400 words. Email it to the Sunday Assembly or Facebook or Twitter, we'll get it. And we're going to put together a packet of people that want to run, and we'll hold elections after the Sunday Assembly in May. And these are, if you want to introduce yourself, if you want to talk more about your ideology. I'm a Christian, but I love to come into Sunday Assembly. I'm an anti-theist, I'm an agnostic atheist, I'm a Unitarian, but I really like coming here too. I feel like speakers should be more this way or that way. I feel like introducing that, giving us something to vote on would be great. We're going to be electing 5 members of the board of directors, and the term will last 6 months. And we just meet once a month to sort of talk through the ideology and how is Sunday Assembly going. And then there's other people who sometimes are also on the board that actually do the production, going out and finding the facilities, picking who speaks, and the board sort of ideologically runs Sunday Assembly. So if you're interested in that, talk to us, send in your blurb, and you can run next month. Okay, so we have last 2 Disney sing-alongs. I'd like to ask everybody to stand and sing along. We have a nice, fun Jungle Book medley. This next song comes from one of my favorite Disney movies that was in my time period when I was growing up. And Tarzan, music of Phil Collins. And one of the coolest part about it is that the good guys are scientists. I'm a scientist. And not because they're making cool little trinkets and toys, it's just because they're scientists and they're trying to do the right thing. And that's just the coolest thing. All right, so let's try this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everybody.